You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholics, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and a charm, just like Jim. It's more than life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag
For what?
with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more than life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club,
Why?
buy some bottles, impress them girls.
what?
It's more than life.
Oh, fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast and Who Dat. And we got some main course for you coming at you with some Saints news here. A lot of little news and notes to kind of rehash the weekend, but we got quite a bit to get into here. So we'll just go ahead and get into that right now. So can I get a menu? And the first thing is, I guess it was maybe like a week ago or so, a week or two ago, couple podcasts back, we were talking about how Cam Jordan was maybe looking for an extension, and how doing that would probably be good for the team, you know, to help reduce his cap number, and how he's just such a great player, and he's a free agent after this season, and how you really just wouldn't want to see him play anywhere else, honestly. But I guess this was on what day this was on. This must have been yesterday, so this must have been like Wednesday. Mickey Loomis was on a Sirius XM radio show, NFL radio show, and he had this to say. He said, so this is Mickey Loomis talking about maybe an extension and what he thinks about Cam Jordan. So he says he's going to be able to play for us as long as he wants to and as long as he can. And I put a little bit of context in there because the way the NFL works, it's like as long as you want to play for the Saints, as long as you want to play at this amount, or as long as you're able to still play. So there can be some hidden keys and notes in a statement like that. As long as he wants to, as long as he's does what he has to do to be able to play for this team still. And then he went on to say, then when the time comes, his name will be up in the Ring of Honor and Hall of Fame and all those accolades that come with a player of his stature, which should definitely be true. I believe has the most sacks of any player currently active, the second most, because I think he has like 115 and a half, and Von Miller has like 123 and a half. So, and both of them were drafted in the 2011 draft. So it's amazing that such great defensive linemen came out of the same draft. And I think there's a couple more that came out of there. Maybe Chandler Jones came out of that draft as well. But stated that, you know, he's on track to be a free agent for the first time in his career, be next offseason. So I guess they over the course of his career, they've done a pretty good job of securing him, making sure he's got the bag secured before it's even come close to his contract expiring. But we talked about his big cap hit, and he actually has the biggest cap hit on the team at the moment at $15.1 million. And that's only for the 2023 season. And they've pushed back a bunch of dead money and spread about a lot of dead money just on that current contract. I think it's probably about time to sign him to an extension, so you don't have to worry about that dead cap number getting higher and higher. And the Saints, they can work something out to definitely take down that $15.1 million, because Derek Carr is on a $150 million contract, $100 million guaranteed, and he's only the cap number for that this year is just $7 million. So they can work something out. But as decorated as a player Jordan is, he's had 7 sacks and at least 7 or more sacks in 11 consecutive seasons, 2012 to 2022. And that's the longest streak in the NFL, which that should help going towards accolades for the Hall of Fame. He broke the franchise record for sacks, Ricky Jackson last year. And I mean, he's the kind of player that you want on this team. If nothing else, maybe he's not the double-digit sack guy anymore. Maybe not even the 8 sack guy anymore. But he's an energy guy. He's a juice guy. He's a leader, a team leader, and players like that. Basically, he's the defensive end form of Demario Davis, but I just couldn't ever see him playing on another team. Loomis also went on to say how we continue to count on Cam Jordan. Everybody said, well, maybe this is it, but he just keeps going. He's the Energizer Bunny, right? Doesn't miss time, just keeps playing and keeps being productive. One of the better ends in our league, so we're excited to have him back. And I feel the same way as Mickey Loomis does. Just want him back. Couldn't imagine seeing him playing for any other team. And hopefully they get an extension hammered out soon, so there'd be no worries about him possibly being a free agent next year, or maybe wanting to be traded at the deadline of this season coming up. But so Mickey Loomis had a lot of kind words to say there about Cam Jordan on Wednesday. All right. Once again, just kind of rehashing news and stuff that I've kind of already talked about. And this time, last week it was talking about how the Saints were going to have like a joint practice with the Chargers, and I was talking about the different teams that the Saints have had joint practices with over the years, with it being like the Chargers, the Texans, the Green Bay Packers, the Patriots. And I was just talking about how there was a little stretch there between, trying to think, it was between like 17 and 19 or 18 or something. It was like a 3-year period where the Saints had a joint practice every year with the Houston Texans. And that's who they're going to have another joint practice with, is the Houston Texans. And that'll be, I guess, before the preseason game on August 19th, and I guess that's at Houston Methodist Training Center. So it'll be there. So they'll have a joint practice with the Chargers, LA Chargers, and the Houston Texans. And this is kind of an interesting little note. So I said that the Saints had like a 3-year period there. I think it was from 17 to 19 where they had a joint practice with Houston every year. Well, this will be the first time that the Houston Texans have had a joint practice since 2020. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, maybe they kind of called that business off. There's just too much going on in the organization with the Deshaun Watson business. So maybe that's why they stopped holding them, or maybe teams didn't want to hold practice with them because there's too much drama swirling around them. But the last time they had a joint practice was in 2019 with the Detroit Lions. So maybe that was after one of the Saints games. But I think this Houston Texan teams is more of a respectable team to have a practice with, because now they actually have a more respectable quarterback, or who they want to be their quarterback, in C.J. Stroud. So they got a quarterback. They got their staple on offense. And then what was it? Will Anderson? Yeah, it was. Then they also have their centerpiece, the player that they're trying to build around, and Will Anderson Jr., who they also drafted in the first round. Those players went 2-1 first overall. So they've got something going there. They got centerpieces, landmarks on the offense and the defense now. So I would say they're probably a little bit more respectable of a team than back in 2020, and not that they are more like a team that the Saints would want to practice with, like when they did from 17 to 19, when they still had Deshaun Watson and all that business with him wasn't swirling around him. So I said before, I like these joint practices. It gives your team an opportunity to try new things out against different opponents and really get a gauge of how good they are compared to other teams around the league. So I'm a fan of that. All right, now this is it's probably taken me a little bit of time to get to this, and I'm sure there's Saints fans out there that probably wanted to hear my opinion on this. But let's see, it's just the John Gruden. He came by and came to the facility. I guess that was last year, and he came to the facility and was I guess went out to the Four Seasons and had dinner with Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael, and after they had that dinner, they did he I guess spent what 5.5 hours around the Saints facility talking about Derek Carr and I guess how you can get the most out of him and whatnot. But I guess trying to get to I guess what my personal opinion on this is. I guess personally, obviously, I didn't like what John Gruden did with the emails. The homophobic, the racist emails. All that stuff is bad. Yes, I agree with that. But I think he got blackballed and railroaded a little bit from that because he had emails from over what 30 years of being in the NFL shared with people, with him having some negative, poor statements about people, like, and the fact that he was the only person that emails were shown, because I find it very hard to believe that over the course of 30 years, there's not any owners or coaches that have said something similar. But that doesn't excuse what he did. But I'm also don't agree with like completely blackballing people either. And I guess because of that, the disparaging of his name and him getting blackballed and basically kicked out of the league, he is currently like suing the NFL, which I get that. I can understand that if he has an actual case to do that. But I guess getting back to just on the football side of it, I agree with this. I like this. And the reason is because that last season, I guess that was the 2021 season before all the emails and things came out. And I guess that was his third season with the Raiders and Derek Carr. And they were actually starting to look good. They were actually starting to look like a playoff team. Henry Ruggs was starting to come on and looking like maybe he could get 1,000 yards. And then he has the vehicular manslaughter, and that takes a weapon away from Derek Carr. And John Gruden, I think people try to say like he didn't have any success with the Raiders before he got there, but they were a better team over those 3 years, because I mean the Raiders were winning like what 5-6 games before he got there, and then when he got there they won 7, they won 8, and then they won 10 in 2021 to make the playoffs. And a lot of people argue that the Raiders got kind of railroaded against the Bengals in the playoffs. But he wasn't the coach anymore at that point. But I'm just stating that with the time there, it showed that he was improving. And so I'm all for just any little bit can help. anything you can do. This is a win-loss league. That's all you're judged upon. And someone asked me about how much the Saints were paying him, and I was saying they probably didn't pay him at all. This is kind of a an opportunity for him, that if, like, after him giving this information to the Saints and kind of giving them a breakdown of their offense and his offense, like if the Saints go on to have a really good season or something, then maybe that would help John Gruden's image across the league. Thinking that, oh well, he helped the Saints and Derek Carr to a good season. But on the flip side, still he'll have a little bit of input on this. Obviously, it's just 5.5 hours. I don't know how much you can really install and input in 5.5 hours, but this could be. He could also possibly be a fallback uh, fallback coach for the Saints, possibly, if Pete Carmichael is a failure and their offense doesn't look good, or if they just look terrible altogether. Hell, Dennis Allen could be fired. He could become the head coach. But I think this is. I don't want to say it's a developing story, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And I'm not one. I'll just say it again. I'm not really one to cancel John Gruden for what he did. I think everyone, for the most part, deserves a second chance, and be interesting to see how this all plays out. All right. This is also going on to the next bit of information, news going on, and this is nothing really uh, directed exactly directed towards the Saints, completely. This is just, I'm sure a lot of fans want this to happen, or are interested in to see what happens with this. And what I'm talking about here is DeAndre Hopkins being available at wide receiver, and the Saints could possibly use another wide receiver. That their primary receiver and number one receiver is obviously going to be Chris Olave, and then people are hoping that Michael Thomas will be okay and come back, and that's kind of where I come in. My opinion kind of comes in with this, is that besides the PED suspension and things like that, you know I'd be willing to bet he's not going to be the same player that he was over the past couple of years, because of the fact that he's not taking the PEDs anymore. But you also got to look at Michael Thomas on his durability and how he's been hurt over the last 3 years. But the reason I would think this would be a good fit, me personally thinking it's a good fit, is that I look at Michael Thomas at this point in his career, if he's healthy and when he plays, and then I look at DeAndre Hopkins also at this point in their career, his career, that they're very similar players. You know, they're never really known for being like burners, speed guys, or or anything like that. They're always been known for like their great route running and their uh, great hands and run after the catch ability, and that's why I think he would be, if the Saints signed him. I would look at him specifically as basically an insurance policy for Michael Thomas, because he in my opinion at this point in both of their careers, they're the same player, and so that's how I would view it, and that's why I would like it if they signed him. But it wouldn't be the end of the world either, because at the end of the day, if Michael Thomas stays healthy, I mean, how many options and balls are there to go around, from like Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed, your tight ends, Foster Monroe, Juwan Johnson. I mean, really, how many opportunities would DeAndre Hopkins have than if Michael Thomas was healthy. And I think he's talked about wanting to play with teams with established quarterbacks. I mean, Derek Carr, I guess you could say Derek Carr is that. He's probably good enough to be listed as that. And then, everyone talks about how the Saints don't have any cap money or anything like that, or 100 million over or 60 million over. Right now, they do have 13.6 million to sign him. I mean, that would be more than enough for him to sign because I think when he signs a contract, I think his contract's going to be very similar to Odell Beckham Jr.'s. Odell Beckham Jr. got like 15 million with a possibility to get 18 million with incentives and things. So I think at this point in DeAndre Hopkins' career, coming off the PED season and the last two seasons were kind of down years, I could see I would expect DeAndre Hopkins to get between 15 and 18 million. And this kind of added incentives, he's never really played in cold weather either with him playing for the Texans, playing in a dome there, and then played with Arizona his last couple of years, which was warm weather. But from the things I've read and from teams that have been interested in him before he was released, they were interested in possibly trading for him. They're both cold weather teams, so the Saints have that leg up on them, and that was the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. And I can respectfully and honestly say I could 100% understand why he would want to play for those teams because that if he ends up signing with one of those teams, that's 100% ring chasing. And at that point in his career, I could respect him, definitely respect him picking one of those teams over the Saints. But there's been speculations, honestly, of the Saints maybe going after a different wide receiver, anyways. And now it's June 1st, and a lot is talked about June post-June signings. I think contracts aren't guaranteed after that. Teams can manipulate the salary cap more after that, and so the player that Saints have maybe been kind of looking into is the Las Vegas Raiders, another teammate of Derek Carr, Hunter Renfrow, the slot receiver for them, which he was not great last year, but the previous season in 2021, he got a Pro Bowl nod for being a slot receiver, had 1,000 yards, 100 catches, and I think he fits more of a need for the Saints just at the wide receiver position because right now I couldn't tell you who the Saints slot receiver is, like who would be designated to that position. Is it Rashid Shaheed or is it Chris Olave? I mean, usually Michael Thomas is an X receiver, an outside receiver, but that would add like a whole new. If they traded, which I don't really like. The one thing I would like about this situation is if they sign DeAndre Hopkins, they don't have to give up anything for him because he's a free agent. But Hunter Renfrow, they had to trade for him, but he's a specialist, so that's why I would like that. And once again, he's another teammate of Derek Carr, so I mean that just makes it even more comfortable and easy transition for Derek Carr. And once again, kind of falls back to the whole John Gruden thing. John Gruden, I'm sure he's familiar with Hunter Renfrow as well. But if they had to trade for him or give anything up for him, I would be surprised if it's anything more than a 5th round pick. I'm sure the Raiders, more than anything, are probably wanting the Saints to eat some of that salary cap. But out of the two, DeAndre Hopkins and Hunter Renfrow, I think Hunter Renfrow probably fits better, honestly, just because he's a specialty. it fits a special need and adds adds an element to the Saints wide receiver group. But I would be happy with both of those players, either one, because you can never have enough depth at any position, and especially the Saints have had a lot of issue with wide receiver over the last couple of years as well. Speaking receivers, not wide receivers, but this is kind of the last bit of news. This happened also on Wednesday. The Saints added another kind of familiar name, kind of similar how they added previously signed a Steelers wide receiver, if I can remember his name. Yeah, so that's why I was getting the name mixed up. So the Saints are signing another Pittsburgh weapon, I guess you could say. I guess he hadn't played there since 2018, but I guess James Washington didn't play with them last year either. But they're getting some old weapons, I guess, from the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Saints added Jesse James and which is a tight end, and then a fullback, Jake Vargas. And with those additions, that completed their 90-man roster, but they had to get rid of Alex Quevedo, which is the kicker. So now they just have two kickers on the roster. Will Lutz obviously being the primary one, and Blake Group as the other one. But when first seeing the signing of Jesse James, who he was with the Browns for just two games last year due to a bicep injury, and then he's had stints with the Bears and the Lions, and he did most of his damage in this league with the Steelers. And then Vargas, he just saw some action in games with the Vikings, and most recently was with the Dolphins. So it'd be out of these two, I'm most interested in the Jesse James signing. And honestly, I had him mixed up with a different Steelers tight end. I thought he, when thinking back of like highlights and stuff and angry runs and stuff, I was thinking he was the player that had the 75-yard stiff arm against the Buccaneers, but actually that was Vance McDonald that had that play. So I had those players mixed up. But then doing like research and looking at highlights and stuff of Jesse James, he had a couple seasons where he had, 50, 60 catches, for like 300, 400 yards, and I had him mixed up with a different play that people might remember, and that was the no catch week 15 in 2018 against the Patriots, which should have won that game for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it was a weird play where he caught the ball, turned, and stretched out over the end zone. But when you watch the play, when the ball hits the end zone line, the ball like does a little spin, and you could definitely argue both ways that whether it was a touchdown or whether he dropped it without having a second football move. And it's just very, very, that was an interesting moment in that 2018 season. And they, like I said, they would have beat the Patriots, I think, if they got the touchdown. And even if they would have been able to get a field goal because they were at like the 5-yard line, it would have been able to tie it. But I think shortly after that play was overturned, I think Ben Roethlisberger threw an interception. So I kind of had Jesse James mixed up, but he is a player that's had some success. He's had 40, 50 catches, 300, 400 yard seasons with 4 or 5 touchdowns. I like this. I like this signing as well because it it adds more depth to the tight end room, with Dwan Johnson, Foster Monroe, and Lucas Kroll, and even Taysom Hill, who we all know is kind of more of a specialist than a tight end, but he hasn't been around. He hasn't been at OTAs yet, so getting another tight end in there to get some reps, I'm all for that. And especially, you like seeing names that you're kind of familiar with, even though I had to refresh my memory on him, but still, I like it. Just like I would be perfectly fine with them adding DeAndre Hopkins or Hunter Renfrow. Like I said earlier, with that, you can never have too much depth at any one position. So, a lot of news and notes and things coming. It's slow. It's a slow part of the off season, but we'll still come up with some content here. There's always some kind of news coming out with the Saints, and it's heating up. OTAs are happening. Voluntary workouts will be coming up soon in training camp, and then that'll be really exciting to kind of get a gauge of kind of the players that are kind of making themselves known, kind of being standout players. But anyways, with all that news and notes, I think that's about all I have for you this evening. So with that, who dat? And can I get a check, please?